We are nearing the start of the 2026 Florida legislative session, if you can believe that. It seems like the 2025 session just wrapped, but here we are. So heading into this year, both House Speaker Danny Perez and Senate President Ben Albritton are in their last year of their terms. Recently, our Jason Delgado sat down with Senate President Albritton to talk about his career in Tallahassee and beyond. Here is that conversation. Watch.
Now, you've served in public office here in Tallahassee since 2010, though this last session was your first as Senate President. Talk a little bit about how your time in the pocket here in Tallahassee kind of shaped your leadership as Senate President.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you for the opportunity to spend time with you. Very gracious of you, and I look forward to our time together. What brought me into a life of public service? You know, for a long time, I was not really involved with politics, just to be clear, right? I was one of the folks back home. I work in the ag industry. I'm a citrus grower, fourth generation. So in Florida's heartland is where I'm from, where my family's from, 6 generations. I was on the list. I'd be one of the ones that would, be on a host committee or something along those lines for a good candidate that would be supportive of agriculture in the area. And the guy that had the House seat prior to me, we were sitting there one day just chatting, a friend of mine, and I asked him, who's going to run for your seat? And it was all in the context of, who do we get behind, right? Who are you thinking? And he blew me away. He said, well, what about you? And I said something that I probably shouldn't have. I said, not in a million years. And he said, well, look, just think about it, right? Talk to Missy and see what you think. And then lo and behold, about a year later, now, not to be clear, I didn't see a burning bush or a handwriting on the wall, and I didn't hear the audible voice of God, but faith's really important to my family and I. And I knew in that moment, August 17th, 2008, I knew that this was something I needed to take a hard look at, and that's actually where it came. It's just that simple.
Now, you know perhaps better than anyone else in this building that Florida ag is a sensitive industry. I don't want to say fragile, but it certainly has its vulnerabilities. Was that part of your calculus in entering to politics, kind of paying your respects back to that industry?
Well, as I'd mentioned, being a fourth generation citrus grower, almost everybody that I spend time with back home, they grow something for a living. Mm-hmm. So it's really more about the culture, right? It's rural Florida's culture, agriculture. It's just an incredible lifestyle, and I've been blessed, my family and I have been blessed to be a part of it. Now, that being said, sure, right, the number of people that grow things for a living that serve in the legislature are few and far between. Agriculture is sometimes misunderstood. So the opportunity to be able to spend some time here, again, once we got past the hurdle of, hey, this is something I feel called to do, that do I feel like, and has it been the case for the last 15 years that serving agriculture and helping to inform the people around me that are serving in the legislature of what agriculture is, the whys, the hows, the whats? Yeah, absolutely. It's been a huge honor to be supportive of the ag industry here.
Tell me if I'm wrong. You came in to Tallahassee 2010?
2010. That's right.
Fast forward to today, you're now the Senate President. From 2010 till now, how did that journey kind of shape how you kind of carry this office and operate in this office?
Well, so I'm a pretty simple guy. And I will tell you, for me, it's faith, family, freedom, opportunity, life. That's part of the culture, I think, maybe of rural Florida, but I'm a Republican, and that's been kind of the mantra in my philosophy. The other piece of what I have learned in my life is that relationships matter. Relationships matter. So as far as coming into the House in 2010 and then ending up in 2025 being the Senate President, that is a function of relationships. I'm a big believer in investing in other people. I would hope that the folks in the Senate, the other senators, would say to you that I have shown them, one, that I do. I love them, regardless of their party, regardless of anything else. They're all human beings. They all have their own experiences that I do. I love them. I believe love is an action. It's not just a word. Secondly, I've worked very hard in building those relationships to listen. Be a good listener. Because you can learn something from everyone, regardless of the background, regardless of perspective, any of that. You can learn a lot of whys of why people do what they do, why they advocate for what they do. And sometimes in politics, we've all seen it. We kind of get crossed up on philosophies without really leaning in to be sure and understand, where each other are coming from. So I would say that the journey from 2010 to today has been rooted, to use an agricultural term, rooted in being a good listener and building relationships.
Now, as we mentioned, this was your first session. It was also, in some ways, unique. It went well beyond its typical 60 days, and there was a struggle over the Florida budget. Can you talk about what that process was like? And then, moreover, what was the balancing act you had to do between your ideological beliefs and then the need to land the plane on a state budget?
Yeah, well, what a great question, right? The 25 session was unique, but I don't believe it was unique just because it ran over and not that you're advocating or suggesting that, but it certainly was unique in a lot of ways. But one of the most important ways that it was unique is that, I use this analogy, and I've got a big respect for the speaker, and been serving 8 years in the House. I know the House and the Senate, they operate differently, but at the end of the day, people should be encouraged, in my opinion, that it took as long as it did to get the budget landed. And the biggest reason is why, is that there was, regardless of some disagreements, some incremental, some more significant, but the biggest reason why it took that long is that the House and the Senate and the governor were interested in good government. You've got a budget that hovers somewhere around $115 billion. And if you're going to look at that budget in meaningful terms, look to measure outcomes, not just outputs. Look for efficiencies in government that maybe previously had been overlooked or just weren't a focus of some particular senator. The point I'm making is that the reason, in my opinion, the reason it is unique and it is most beneficial, and again, people should be encouraged, is that we looked at every dollar. It's like eating a whale. Forget about eating a cow one bite at a time. It's like eating a whale, $115 billion. There was a huge amount of time that went in, both in the House and the Senate and with the governor, to understand what we were doing, why we were doing it, what's working, what's not working. I mean, it was immense, but it was beneficial. And Floridians, at the end of the day, they were the beneficiary of all that work.
Let's talk about that budget, because you've got a supermajority in both chambers. Neither side chamber really got what they wanted, whether it was sales tax, the closing exemption on tax. There were certainly compromises made. What was your perspective, I suppose, on the end product?
The answer to the question is, was I satisfied with the budget at the end, even though there were some things, both the House and the Senate and the governor did not get across the line of things we identified as priorities? Yes, I was satisfied with it. And here's why: because it was one of the lowest per capita budgets that we have seen in years. It's the budget that we're living in today, that we passed through the last session, is lower by several $billion than the budget before. Not to mention the fact, when you look through the budget as a whole, there are lots of new outcome metrics that are part of that we're going out saying, hey, tell us what's happening here, help us understand, what the efficiencies are. So all in all, yes, I was satisfied with the budget, and nobody gets everything they want. That's just the nature of politics, right? But Floridians got what they needed, and that is a budget that was less. The debt reduction has been fantastic. We've cut the state debt basically in half over the last several years. We continued moving down that road. We made some really good budgetary decisions that Floridians win by. So are there things that I recommended, or maybe our leadership team or other senators recommended, that we thought would be important in the whole conversation of tax relief? Sure. But at the end of the day, the tax relief was substantial and it was real. And we've got to remember, at 30,000 feet, to be goal-oriented, that is, regardless of the mechanism, we gave meaningful tax relief to Floridians and lowered the budget. That's a big deal, and I'm proud of that.
let's talk a little bit about, if you will, there was a bit of an exchange of fire between the governor's office and the House Speaker. You certainly found yourself in the middle of that. How do you think that impacted the negotiations last session? And then moreover, what does that mean for the legislature going towards 2026?
Well, I've learned this much after 15 sessions. I've learned this much is that, most folks when they get elected, it includes the speaker, it includes myself, it includes every senator, House member, the governor, and quite frankly, it is unavoidable. And that is, if you're passionate about something, it's hard not to get stirred up. And that's just a fact. So it's natural, it's human nature, right? If you're passionate about something, you're going to care about it, you're going to want to see something happen. What I would define as last year as it relates to, I'm not going to speak for the governor. I have respect for him. He's been a good partner. I have a respect for the speaker. And I believe, regardless of what anybody says, you look at the great things that were done last year, he's a great partner. The Senate did what the Senate does. And that is we collaborate, we work together, at least inside of our chamber walls and inside the Senate office building, working on what we believe is meaningful, what is thoughtful, what we're Floridians care about. So, the most important piece of all of it is recognizing that, sure, politics can get a little messy, and we've all been a part of that. But the fact is that the plane got landed and Floridians are better served by it. So, in some kind of maybe weird way, I think people having passion about the things they care about is what makes politics both messy and great. And we experienced that last year. It was meaningful for me, and I believe for the speaker and for the governor. And Floridians should take heart. They got a good budget last year, a good process, a good policy last year. It was a good year.
Now, one of your big priorities is this rural renaissance. Can you give me the elevator pitch? What's the vision on that package?
Well, the first thing I want to say, I appreciate the question about rural renaissance, and I'm not going to take your credit for that name. Walking into it is a great name, and Katie Betta that works here in the president's office actually came up with that name, and I love it. It's glorious. Well, the truth is that beginning in the summer before I actually took the gavel, the previous Senate President, Pasademo, gave me a huge amount of flexibility with staff to start working on things that were important, and this one was important. Obviously, coming from rural Florida, understanding rural Florida, it was important to take a look closely and find out, what we could do to be supportive. Second thing I want to say is that this last year I was blown away, but so deeply encouraged as well that Secretary Rollins, the USDA Secretary for the Trump administration, sent us a letter of support, and I've since talked with her about, how does this look, this idea of a rural renaissance, how does it look relative not just to Florida but for the rest of the country? There's crisis going on in rural Florida all over the country, and let me put that into perspective for you and what that really means. Rural Florida is special. Rural Florida struggles with job creation. Rural Florida struggles paying bills. This is the analogy I use when I'm talking to folks. A lot of times you get to a place to where somebody's trying to figure out, and maybe in a more urban area that has the benefit of a better tax base or something along those lines, and they try to figure out, we have these resources, what do we spend them on that is going to be to the most benefit for our constituency, our communities. In rural Florida, it doesn't work that way. In rural Florida, to use a farm analogy, they don't have a chicken or an egg. They just really don't have the resources. So the Rural Renaissance package as a whole, it's very comprehensive. It includes healthcare, it includes education, it includes a lot of things. The dollar amount on Rural Renaissance is not, substantial billions of dollars, but all the different components of it really try to hit where the challenges are in rural Florida, education consortiums, just to try to help them move the ball in a way that keeps rural Florida in the nature of rural Florida. Anybody that's ever lived there knows that it's a very special place to live, but also gives rural Florida a better opportunity to be able to grow the way they want to grow, to be able to create jobs and look for opportunity, or even create opportunity in a way that those communities want, so that they can still, at 5 o'clock, leave. We were just joking about that, but at 5 o'clock, leave the office and drive home and not have to go through an incredible amount of traffic. So, the rural renaissance is, in my opinion, it's the product of the Florida Senate. It's the product of our staff's hard work. Again, super thrilled that the Trump administration, through the USDA Secretary, is supportive of it. Now, I look forward to we've put it forward. The bill's been filed. Senator Simon has filed that bill again. Look forward to going out there and pushing that and to see if we can get it done this year.
It's long been said, and I don't know if you agree or not, but that rural Florida, it's perhaps been overlooked over the past decades, if you will, from this capital. Would you agree with that?
I don't know that I'd use the word overlooked. I mean, that may be a strong word, but at the end of the day, maybe. Right? But it's a function. Well, somebody said to me one time, and I'd have to go back and look at the numbers to make sure this is still accurate, but 80% of the population lives within 20 miles of a coastline. Just the nature of Florida, the beaches, the culture, the lifestyle, all of that. I think the challenge for rural Florida has been that because of a very small population base, their voice has not been as substantial as maybe in a more urban area where you got a lot of people in a condensed area. I don't know about overlooked, but maybe a better way to put it is that there's pending opportunity in rural Florida to help them advance their lifestyle that has just not been a part of as heavily of the conversation in Tallahassee as this last year and hopefully this year that we're going to be able to have.
Now, you've refiled that rural renaissance. What's the strategy now moving forward? How do you plan to get it over the finish line this time?
Well, the first thing is to file it, and that's been done. We've worked through it. We've continued to hone, continue to look for either additions or maybe tweaks inside of the legislation that would make it better. And then at the end of the day, it's going to be what the political process always yields, is that we're going to get it moved over here in the Senate and we're going to get it over to the House, and I'm hopeful that they're going to be open-minded about it, have every reason to believe they will. And then we'll just look and see as the Senate puts forward its priorities, the House puts forward their priorities, and the governor puts forward his, that we just find a way to blend it all together and everybody gets some wins, and we can get it done.
What else? What other priorities might you have going into 26?
Well, I do want to suggest something to you that, and yes, we're thinking forward in 26, but I want to go back and make a couple of comments about two pieces of legislation that originated in the Senate last year, and the House was thoughtful and they came alongside of us on it, and the governor did as well. Is that we did one for support of families in Florida that have children that are autistic. That's a growing phenomenon here in the state, and today the numbers are very, very low. One in, maybe I've heard different, depends on where they're coming from, but maybe one in 24 to 1 in 36 children are born with autism today. It's something that we have to pay attention to. So we put together a comprehensive package, and I'm thankful that the House and the governor came along with us. So those families are going to see a renewed focus, or a new focus really, in being able to how state government operates and how we can be supportive of those families. And the second is the Tristan Murphy Act. I met his family, his parents, in Charlotte County because of Sheriff Permel down there, and immediately just really fell in love with them. And Jim DeFeedy down in Miami also had a lot to do with this, calling attention to this, as did Judge Leifman in Miami. And what it really does is Tristan Murphy committed suicide in prison because he was deeply mentally ill. And what we did is we didn't go back and look to assign blame. That part of it was over. What we did is we looked at the system as it operates today, and we said, okay, how can we avoid that in the future? Well, that is absolutely worth avoiding, right? So there were a series of things put together that were off-ramps and other treatment scenarios, other things that we identified as we dug into it to be able to hopefully help the next Tristan Murphy and his family here in Florida, and we're super proud of those two things. As it relates to 2026, I think this is really going to be largely a conversation. It will not be exclusive, because when I say that, appropriations versus policy, there will always be thoughts and ideas and policy that we'll need to understand and determine if we can get it all across the line together between the House and the governor and the Senate. But there's going to be a lot of focus this coming year on the budget. Floridians, every single day, Floridians are under the strain of affordability challenges. And that just is what it is. It is as clear as a clear blue sky. It exists. So we're looking right even today and over the past several months, we've been looking very closely at the budget, trying to again insert those thoughts of how do we create efficiencies in the budget? How do we, on the budget that we have focus on here in the legislature and with the governor, how do we create efficiencies in that government so that we're reducing the size and scale of government, but at the same time, living within our means? And that means addressing spending, addressing how the budget is responding to the needs of Floridians, and it's going to be a big year about the budget, I believe.
Let's talk about affordability. I know that's an issue you've championed. On the issue of property insurance, I know this legislature, including yourself, you've rolled up your sleeves. You've made reforms. Looking ahead, are you planning to take more of a wait-and-see approach, or in your mind, does more work need to be done?
So, yes, I would agree with you that property insurance in Florida has become very difficult. And that's a function of a couple of things. But namely, I think the one that regardless of what perspective you have, that we can all agree when you have multiple catastrophic storms in Florida, it is going to put a huge amount of strain on the insurance products that are available here. Not just from Florida companies or nationwide companies that are licensed and operate here in the state to sell property insurance to Floridians, but also in the reinsurance space. Now, I will say this, I met probably a year and a half ago, I met with some reinsurance companies, and my main goal was to understand their perspective and try to figure out what is it that Florida could do that could be helpful to make sure that we are doing everything in our power to lower the cost of home insurance, property insurance in Florida. And one of them made a comment to me that was really fascinating. I'd never looked at it that way. Florida's a special place. Florida has the geography is diverse, the populations are diverse. We have excellent natural systems. It's really a unique place. One of the things they said to me is that Florida, the way that they looked at it was that it was several trillion, $6, $7, $8 trillion worth of property on a sandbar. Hey, think about that for a second. It's true, and we saw the result of that with the storms that came in over the last few years. Now, I will say this, secondly, understanding that, secondly, thank the good Lord above, no hurricane this year, right? Yeah, there you go. We're knocking on the wood. Thank you, Lord. All right, so that is just fantastic. I say that in the context of I've spent a lot of time trying to understand insurance, a lot of time. And it's very, very complex. The simple fact is that it's very difficult for Floridians. So let's go back and say, what should we be doing? A couple of years ago, we passed some tort reform that would limit the number of lawsuits that would be instituted inside of the property insurance space. That in itself, and they had grown to be a substantial amount of financial impact in the insurance space from the product that Floridians buy all the way up to the reinsurance companies. The entire goal was, how do we lower the cost? And here's what's great. What's great is that the governor agreed, the House agreed, and this was under President Pasadomo, the previous president. Those tort reforms were passed. And now what we're going to see this coming year, I'm very hopeful, but what we're going to see because of the rate-making process that insurance companies have to go through, they get scrutinized very closely by the CFO, Chief Financial Officer, one of the cabinet officers here in Florida. So, when losses are going up vis-a-vis storm damages, then rates go up. We're going to get to see now, without a storm this year, when they go in and start making their rate cases for next year's insurance costs, how's it going to affect them? How's it going to affect the cost and thus Floridians? My estimation, my assumption will be at this point is that because there are no losses in Florida, then the cost of operating insurance is going to go down. And when they present that data to the Office of Insurance Regulation inside the CFO, rates are going to come down. And intuitively, if you step back and think about it, not just because of the tort reforms that we passed, and not just because of the impact of the storms, but intuitively, if we're not having hurricanes in Florida, rates ought to come down. So I'm hopeful, and I believe that's going to be the case. And look, anything we can do to help for the affordability crisis in Florida, we should be doing it. So to answer your question, I think we need to see what the impacts of no storms and the legal reform, the tort reform, are going to yield for us this coming year. I'm a big believer, part of coming from rural Florida, but I'm a big believer in you measure 3 times and cut once. We know the affordability crisis is here. We are for Floridians, and we're working for them every single day. Right? The money we're spending here is not our money. It's their money. That's why we should be so incredibly cautious and thoughtful about it. But when it comes with insurance, we're still measuring. And let's make sure about what the impacts are going to be with, a great lack of storm season and those tort reform impacts. And I think Floridians are going to be well served by it. I'm hopeful.
In the same vein, if you will, there's the issue of property taxes. When it comes to affordability, the House Speaker, he's floated at least 8 bills to reduce property tax, and he wants to put all of them on the ballot. What is your strategy on that, on placing potentially all 8 on the ballot?
So what I've learned in this process is the House has their strategy, the Senate has their strategy, the governor has his strategy, and then what we do at the end is we try to figure out what's best for Florida. Now, let me just answer that question with this. Do I believe that there is room inside of property taxes in the state of Florida to where we could reduce those? Absolutely, yes. That is one place that I agree with both the Speaker and the Governor on. This goes back to the measure 3 times, cut once. What I also want to make sure of is, like this process in Tallahassee really is about finding balance. So my goal is to continue to study the issue like we have and will continue to do, continue to understand the data in real terms, because the quality of life at the local level is something we should pay attention to, right? And when you have the conversation about property taxes, we need to be thinking about, okay, if you call 911 and your house is on fire, you'll want to make sure the fire department's coming, right? If something goes wrong in your life and you call 911 and you need law enforcement there, we need to make sure they show up, all right? So it's going to be a discussion, and I think that's the best word to use, a discussion about at what level can we lower the property taxes? How can we make sure that the fundamental services that local governments are giving to their constituents, their communities, right? Not just fire and not just law enforcement, but sanitary services with sewer. You want the water to come out when you turn the spigot on, right? So there's all of those things that have to be measured by this. So I just go back and say this to you. I'm a fundamental believer that we not only can but will lower property taxes here in the state of Florida. We need to be triply sure of what we're doing and why we're doing it. So we're doing the work and we're understanding, what the ramifications of that are going to be, and making sure that we do what's right for the right reasons.
Now, Mr. President, I've got to ask, in that little pile there of 8, is there one that seems maybe more sensible to you than the others?
Oh, you mean you're talking about the package out of the House?
In the House slate, yes, sir.
Yeah, so there were 8 there. I think that's a fair question, right? Should we be having a conversation about affordability and folks in Florida that maybe have more substantial challenges with that do not? Sure. Yeah, I'm not sure, any are better than others, right? Here's what I can say about, what the House came out with, and I know I've seen the clips and have heard, the Speaker talk about, hey, we want to begin the conversation and just throw things out there to see, what everybody else feels about them. There are a couple of pieces that I think really make sense to me. I'm not certain. When I say that, I'm not signaling. I'm just thinking this through. I get elected to think. That's my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
So as Senate President, and plus we have 39 other senators that have opinions and they need to be heard as well. We're a member-driven process. I'm not king of the Senate. I'm here to serve the senators. So, we've got to take a look at those. Plus, there are other ideas that are being floated around. And we need to look at all of them and figure out what is the sweet spot for Floridians to provide that tax relief and maintain those critical services at the local level. We have to take into consideration there are 31 rural counties in the state of Florida, 29 that are fiscally constrained. And we talked a little bit earlier about the Rural Renaissance Package in rural Florida, right? So there's a lot of diversity between, a Miami-Dade or a Leon County or a Jacksonville, Duval County or a Orange County or a Calhoun or a Franklin or a Jefferson or a Hardee. There's a lot of diversity there. So, and we're trying to measure what's the best way to do this. It's not just as simple, I don't think, as just saying, hey, let's do it. It's look at all these factors and try to figure out what makes the most sense and helps the maximum number of Floridians in the best way possible. So I don't know that I have a favorite. But lastly, I will also say that I think whatever we put on the ballot, whether it contains some of those out of the House or whether it contains ideas that the Senate are generating and working through today, or maybe something the governor comes up with, whatever it is, that it should be on the ballot and something that Floridians understand very clearly what they're voting for and what their expectations should be, whatever the manner and how that gets put on the ballot, but it should be easily understandable by Floridians of what we're proposing, and they can make their own mind up about it.
Looking ahead, we're seeing some bills that have been filed in the past and now they're back on deck. Many of them people consider divisive. I think about lowering the minimum gun buying age, and then there's the so-called ban on political flags. Do you think there's any appetite in your chamber to hear these bills and maybe even bring them to the governor's desk?
Mm-hmm. Well, there's been a long discussion for some years now on reducing the age from 21 to 18, and that only applies to long guns. Federal law limits that to 21 for handguns already. So what I will tell you is I don't know the answer to that question, but I do know this. I do know that the recent court ruling to allow open carry in Florida has been stimulating a lot of questions. And there's places in Florida statute today that the laws suggest clearly, they don't suggest, they dictate clearly that it applies to handguns and not long guns. I've been speaking to a lot of sheriffs, been talking to folks, friends like the NRA. I'm a lifetime NRA member. I'm proud of that. Been talking to them about, what all that means. That also brings into consideration the 21 to 18 conversation. So when you look at all of this globally, I hate to put it this way again, we're doing the work. And I'm talking to experts. And I'm talking to people that really understand the ramifications of all of these things. And once we do that with my philosophy and my personal beliefs as well as the rest of the Senate, then I'm hopeful we're going to have a conversation about it to figure out, again, what is best for Floridians. That should be the calling.
I want to talk to you about your leadership style. We talked earlier, there was an exchange of fire, if you will, between the governor's office and the House Speaker. All the while, maybe some radio silence on your end. And you strike me as someone who's far more reserved, perhaps as someone who plays their cards close to their vest. Can you talk about that, about your approach to politics?
Well, let's take the first part of that. I think you've probably coined me pretty well. I am a pretty reserved guy. I've never been my whole life. I think it's probably just part of two things. One, basic genetics. I think my philosophy of being a farmer, I'm a workhorse. I love working, love learning, love asking good questions, love listening, love doing all those things, which is, a little different than other folks. It doesn't mean it's better or worse, but it just means that's how I'm calibrated. The second thing is that I mean what I say when I say measure 3 times, cut once. Let me give you two philosophies that I use, and it's why you've probably seen, or Florida and Floridians, they haven't seen me on the forefront. It doesn't mean that the governor and the speaker aren't right in doing what they're doing. And you know, these are separate branches of government, right? But for me, I am a very reserved guy. There are 2 things that I try to live by. It get difficult sometimes. Again, I've mentioned one, measure 3 times, cut once. And I'm going to tell you something, we're measuring every day in the Florida Senate. We are not sitting here and looking at these things, nor did you say that. I just want to be clear. But we are not sitting here looking at all these substantial issues, doing nothing and sitting on our hands. That is not happening. We are working at this every single day. The second is that you don't take down a fence until you know why it was put up. Sometimes that flies in the face of standard political operations. But because of those 2 things and my experiences in rural Florida, I don't know about cards close to the vest, and I'm not sure I'm prepared yet, nor am I ready to speak for the Florida Senate. I still have to hear from our senators and understand where they're coming from. Again, I'm not king of the Senate. I'm here to support the senators. So, yes, I'm reserved. Don't know about cards close to the vest, but I can assure you right now we're putting in the work. We're getting ourselves well informed, and we're going to be well prepared when the time comes to have a very healthy, thoughtful, responsible conversation with both the governor and the speaker about these important topics.
Your colleague, State Senator Jim Boyd, he's on deck to succeed you as Senate President. What advice, if any, could you give him?
Well, you know, I've actually said to Jim personally what I'm going to share with you, and it's the same that I heard from Kathleen Passidomo, the president prior to me. I want to say this first about Jim. Jim's a friend. I've known Jim. He was in that 2010 House class. So was Kathleen Passidomo, by the way. So I've known Jim now for, 16 years? Jim's a friend. I trust Jim. Jim's going to make a great leader in the Florida Senate. He's going to make a great leader for Florida. And I couldn't be more excited that he's going to be coming into the president's office following me. When I was approaching the presidency, I did a couple of things, and this would be advice that I would give Jim. I've had these conversations with him. I called previous presidents to ask them that question, because you really never know till you hold the gavel. Now, what should I know today that I wouldn't otherwise know if I hadn't been president? What advice would you give? And they gave some great advice. I think not just about Jim, whom I am all in support. I'm so proud of that guy. But when it comes to the presidency, the truth is that every year things change, stuff happens, right? So you never really know what you're going to walk into. The setup of committee structure and who's going to chair what committees, who gets what offices, who parks wherever, all of those things happen. But when it comes to being Senate President, the most important thing is staying in tune with what's happening in Florida and staying in tune with your senators. And I know Jim's going to do that. He's a people person by nature. Kathleen was the same. She had great advice for me. So I'm excited about Jim. He's going to do a great job. Senators love him. He's very fair, very thoughtful. But when it comes to the presidency, it's a learning process every single day. I used that analogy one day when I was speaking to a crowd and somebody asked me, so you ought to have it figured out when you're done. Yeah, I don't think so. I don't think so. Because every day you learn something new, and the presidency for me is about how you do it. And again, it goes back to being a good listener, understanding perspective, putting in the work, like really put in the work. I've read more. I'm a reader by nature anyhow, but I've read more about Lord knows how many topics in the last, 2 years, year and a half that I've read probably the 10 years prior. So it's really about getting in, doing the hard work, rolling up your sleeves, focusing on relationships, and just staying focused on the core mission of doing what's right for the right reason. Perspectives can alter that or offer different ideas of what that is, but finding what that is and staying true to that, that's what matters most.
So you've been in Tallahassee going on about 16 years now. Over the summer, it seems to me like you suggested that maybe this is your last go around, your last bite of the apple, if you will. What are your plans after this 26th session?
So, what a great question. What are my plans beyond the 26th session? Whatever it is God wants. It's just that simple. I've never been a believer in politics that you craft your own pathway. I know that maybe some in the system would say that's not true. Here's what I've found. From the very first time I ran for the House to being given an opportunity to run for the Senate, to be given the opportunity to be Senate President, none of that's in my making. God did all that. So, when it comes to what's next after the 26th cycle, 26th session, man, my focus is just seek Him, be obedient. Whatever it is, it'll be. I pray for the wisdom, the courage to tackle it, whatever it is. That's it.
In all, just about 8 years in the House, in the Senate. When all's said and done, what do you hope your legacy is, the legacy you'll leave behind, not only as a public servant, but sir, also as a person?
Ultimate legacy. It's got to be one thing. I use this in my opening speech, and the average person, not just in Florida, but all over the world, they need hope. They need hope. Hope is an incredibly powerful thing. I use this verse, 1 Corinthians 13:13. Then these three remain, faith, hope, and love. The greatest of these is love. I want my family. Sorry. I want them to know I love them. I want the Florida Senate to know that I love them. And I want Floridians to know I love them. That's it. Sorry.
No.
Sorry. That's what I want. Because love conquers all. Love is, faith, hope, and love. Love is the greatest. Love is not just a word, it's an action. And every Floridian should look for an opportunity to do that every day. Man, if we could all do that, whew, sky's the limit. Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to get upset. I apologize.
Jason Delgado with State Senate President Ben Albritton. Jason, thank you so much.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. To keep up with important issues impacting our communities and hear more conversations with the people who are shaping the future, subscribe to our channel. You can also download our app or find Spectrum News on your TV for balanced, in-depth political coverage and more.